welcome to the GR8 Minds Podcast, brought to you by the Wharfedale, Airedale and Craven Alliance. My name's David Pugh, Children and Young People's social prescriber for the Craven area, and I'm joined by
Sharon, young person social prescriber for GR8 Minds, and I cover Ilkley Wharfedale area.
And today we're joined by a special guest here, and that is Sasha. So hi and welcome to the podcast, Sasha.
Hi, thank you so much for having me today.
You're most welcome. And today we're going to be talking about the topic of autism and neurodiversity. And then Sasha, you're a young person with autism.
Yes.
Yeah? Can you tell us some of your experience of what it's like growing up with autism and how that has maybe been different to other young people? And do you manage situations differently?
Yes, so I was diagnosed with autism at a very young age, so I don't actually remember getting my diagnosis, but I think definitely I would say that for me the biggest effects that autism's had, well, the biggest negative effects would be that I have extreme social anxiety, that I don't really I prefer not to socialise too much, and I overthink a lot if I say something to someone, whether I've caused embarrassment or offence. I just find really, crowded queues, like moving crowds, difficult to deal with. High intensity work and like pressure with like time or work intensity. Struggling to cope with emotional regulations, so crying a lot and things. But I would say that in the positive side of things, there's something called special interest. Interests which are very common in autism, and I have had several special interests throughout my life, but right now, and I feel like this one's definitely going to stay, as I mentioned before, I absolutely love Bon Jovi, and if you're listening, if you don't recognise the name Bon Jovi, you might know the song Living on a Prayer. Well, they're my favourite band, and absolutely whatever I'm struggling with, I listen to them. They always help me. It's a need for me, basically. But that intense sort of passion and need for this band is I would say definitely an autistic trait that neurotypical people wouldn't necessarily have. I mean, obviously you get fans that are neurotypical, but they wouldn't necessarily have the same need and the same sort of intensity. Yes.
Great.
Lovely, thank you, Sasha. So Sasha, do you feel that there's enough autism awareness being taught to students in school?
Definitely not, I would say, because I would say that there really isn't any autism awareness being taught to, at least in my school. I can't speak for other schools because I've never been to them, but I would say that there really hasn't been any autism awareness or lessons or assemblies or anything like that focused on autism. I mean, I did an assembly to the sixth form and to the staff recently about my autistic experiences, and I wouldn't really say that there's been many other insights into what it's really like to be autistic and how autistic people really need to be sort of treated in society.
Brilliant, yeah, and your teacher was just telling us actually on the way in about your assembly, and for someone that does have social anxiety, to give an assembly is a fantastic achievement. So well done for that, Sasha.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know that we've spoken about that before, and you prepared presentations, and should we use that a little bit in the assembly? I think that's amazing, and something that we should be pushing and trying to make it a common thing in schools, because my experience of it in school and going into various different schools, I've not been aware of autism awareness being taught in schools as much. So if we can promote anything like that, and people like yourself being able to do something is absolutely amazing. So well done. Be really proud of that.
I feel like a problem in schools, and I don't want to offend anyone here, but I feel like a problem in schools is that everyone's just sort of lumped into the same box, and like autistic people and neurotypical people are just treated the same. And while I'm not saying that people shouldn't be treated equally, I'm just saying that like people have different needs, and especially with autistic people have different and very acute needs that need to be addressed. So, you know, in a way I'm saying that people do need to be technically treated differently just because they have different needs. And I think that's something that schools don't really address at the moment. So it could be a way to really improve in the future.
Yeah, things to make things easier for everyone is sometimes by making those little differences to make it easy for you as well. So what are some of the perceptions about autism that you've either experienced or heard about?
So I'll start with the biggest misconception that affects me as an individual, because again, I can't speak for anyone else, but I will talk about some of the other ones as well. So the biggest misconception that affects me and is the thing that I'll come back to about special interests. People say that because they can be kind of intense and like obsessive, that they're unhealthy and that they should be sort of squashed and discouraged and limited. And I just really rail against this, because I think that for me, and I never use this term for other people because I know that it can be offensive, but I use the term obsession to describe mine because I don't see obsession as a negative thing. I think that there are good obsessions and bad obsessions, and I think that my obsession with Bon Jovi is good because it increases my mental health security and it gives me a place to run to, and they're a lifeline for me. And but I would say that a lot of people say that in general these special interests or obsessions are unhealthy because they like take up too much of a person's life, or they're too focused on it. Or even just because it's annoying for other people to have to listen to them talking about them. And I just think that they should be approached in a different way, because while it's true that people need to be able to express if they want to change the subject, they shouldn't be treated as unhealthy, because actually they're actually really vital for an autistic person's mental health. And not only do they increase mental health and stop it from declining, it would also decline without it. In whatever situation, because they are vital to an autistic person's well-being. Yeah,
and I think that when we used to chat quite a bit, didn't we?
Yeah.
And we used to speak about mental health, and actually using Bon Jovi for yourself there was so many different ways which you came up with those answers. Actually, I can try this. So when anything negative is happening, then getting a whoa from John Bon Jovi was what always used to help.
Exactly. Well, still does.
Yeah.
And if we're talking about the other misconceptions about autism, I would say that people have a misconception that are always don't care about people or something, and that is not true. In fact, I feel like probably I overcare because I overthink about everything, and I like to keep myself to myself quite a lot of the time, but it doesn't mean that I don't care about people. I actually care deeply about people, and I know that other autistic people do as well. And another misconception about autism is that they're really good at like maths or science, or all these special interests that I mentioned are often to do with maths or science or trains or things like that, or technical things, and that's just not true. A special interest can be anything. It can be anything it could be scientific, it could also be like Bon Jovi or another band or a celebrity or a film, or it could really be anything. And all of these interests and passions, they give the autistic people unique talents and strengths. It doesn't mean that it's always sort of STEM based.
I think you've answered the next question already, Sasha. Fantastic. So the next question was, can you describe some of the unique strengths and talents someone associated with autism may have? And you described, the mathematics.
Yeah.
I know Albert Einstein had autism. And you've mentioned, your intense passion for Bon Jovi helps with your mental health. I think that's a strength. That's
definitely.
That's your toolkit, isn't it? So,
that's it.
And when you said the word obsession, we think of it negatively. I think you've hit the nail on the head, because if someone was to sit telling you about, their cycling weekend they had, and they've not stopped cycling all weekend, and it's improved the mental health, being outdoors and doing exercise, then we shouldn't really think of someone's passion for music any differently if that's supporting them.
Exactly. And I think that like you're saying, I think with the word obsession, the reason why I don't find it offensive, and that's because I don't see obsessions as an inherently bad thing. I think the reason why people could find it offensive is that they think that obsessions are bad, but I think that they can be bad, but they're not necessarily. It really depends on what it makes you do, you sort of thing. And what you were saying earlier about the unique talents, about the maths thing, I would say that's one of the misconceptions, because it obviously can apply to autistic people, but it doesn't apply to all autistic people. There's a lot of different talents that autistic people could have. For example, I would say that for me, maybe a talent that I have coming from autism is empathy, because I seek empathy from others when I'm struggling, and I seek for people who have a common love of Bon Jovi. I really enjoy listening to my friends when they need to tell me about something, or to meet people who have a love, even if it isn't Bon Jovi. If they have a band or a musician that they really, really love and are a huge fan of, even if it isn't Bon Jovi, I can still relate to them, because I know what it's like to feel like that about a band. So yeah, I would say empathy and understanding and is one of the talents that autistic people can have because of their own experiences leading into that. And actually, one of the misconceptions about autism is that people don't have empathy. Sorry. So I would say that that is actually a misconception, because autistic people can have more empathy because they maybe need more empathy, and that in turn makes them have more empathy for others.
I know that's definitely true of you.
Oh, thank you.
I would say that you're definitely very empathetic from meeting you and chatting to you, you. In school and things. Then you're always checking in on how I am and things like that, and asking me questions as well, and seeing how I felt about things and understanding that. So yeah, I think that's fantastic.
Thank you, Sasha. So
that's okay.
If there's any young people listening to the podcast who are questioning whether they have autism, would you have any advice to them, and what would that be?
I suppose I would say definitely if you can, talk to your parents about it. I know that's not easy in every case, but if you can, because they might be able to tell you more information, or they might be able to get in contact with someone who can. Maybe Childline as well. I mean, I used Childline, I think it was last year. I used it quite a bit. So I think they could be really helpful as well if you wrote to them and asked them about you were thinking you had autism. And I would also think about maybe do you have any of the features of autism? Like, do you have an intense passion for something that seems to be more than what people around you have for their passions, or do you have increased social anxiety or get overwhelmed easily? I'm not I don't claim to be an expert on it, but yeah, that's the advice I would say.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, great pieces of advice.
Yeah, and I think speaking to people about things, people that you can trust, and trying to look up and do a little bit of research and find out things is great. And there's a couple of different organisations out there. I know that in the local area there's one called Aware, which is the Airedale and Wharfedale Autism Resource, and there's the National Autistic Society as well. They've got their website, which is autism.org.uk. But yeah, there's different places out there that can offer a little bit of support, and worth looking into. But I think that's great advice. Thank you.
That's okay.
Okay, and then in terms of other advice as well, do you have any advice to other young people on speaking to and being friends with someone with autism? Because I know when we've spoken in the past, we've talked about how it can sometimes be really good to learn a little about a certain topic. So it might be for one of your friends to learn just a little bit about Bon Jovi, so that they can talk about that subject. But then also that at times it can be okay to say, I want to talk about something else now.
Yeah, so I think in my presentation that I did to the staff at my school and the students, I talked a lot about this. about what David was saying about the communication, and especially if you're talking to someone with autism and they do have a special interest, it's like for me it would be Bon Jovi, but obviously for them it would be something different. Then I would say to a neurotypical person talking to an autistic person about it, I would say that it's really, really important to understand that this topic for that person is not just a casual interest or a hobby or just something they like. It's actually a need for them, and it's a huge part of their life. It's one of the most important things in their life, and it's extremely emotionally sensitive topic. I think of it as like if you were talking to someone religious and you didn't share their belief, I mean, you wouldn't like criticize them for having that belief. Well, it's the same thing with an autistic special interest. You need to be sensitive about people's special interests because they're extremely important to that person. And whilst it may be difficult to understand why such thing is so important to a person, for example, for me, it might be difficult to understand why this band that I'm a fan of is so vital to my life and my well-being, but it just is. And I think that it's just in general in society, these special interests need to be viewed more positively and as the vital mental health support that they are. So I would say to communicate with people when you need to talk about something else is really important, because if you don't communicate then and you just leave it to the last minute, then it ends up being a very angry and passive aggressive, and I can't count the number of times that people have become very angry and critical and slightly passive-aggressive about Bon Jovi towards me, and I cannot express how hurtful that is. And so I would say that it's really, really important that you know that when you need to talk about something else, you do so immediately in a very sensitive and kind way. For example, you could say, thanks for telling me about XYZ. It's really good to know that you've got something that you really love. Is it okay if we talk about one of my favourite things now? So some advices I would give is don't, when you're saying you want to talk about something else, like don't directly mention the person's special interest and saying you don't want to talk about that, because that could be offensive and dismissive. Instead, just say, emphasize your need for variety rather than your need to not talk about whatever it is, because that it puts the emphasis on the fact that you don't like the conversation to be about the same thing all the time, rather than making them think that you don't care about them and their needs and their passion.
Exactly, and that's a lot more positive, isn't it?
Yeah.
Rather than the negative against something. It's the positive side of the variety. I think that's brilliant to hear. Okay, so thank you for that, Sasha. So in summary, then we've got lots of different bits of advice there in terms of ways of talking to people with autism and being positive, even if we want to change the subject, trying to link up with some of those special interests and learn a little bit more about them. Being aware of some of those misconceptions that you've mentioned, and being sort of aware of how things may feel for a young person with autism, particularly around things like social anxiety, and recognising that and how it can impact things and be difficult for somebody. And there's lots of places that you can go for a little bit of support around that. So I mentioned Aware earlier as a local organisation. Their website is aware-uk.org. The National Autistic Society at autism.org.uk. I know that there's one in Leeds that has lots of information, quite a lot for parents. They've got some different sort of information sessions and webinars and things on there, and they're called the STARS team over at Leeds, and their website is starsteam.org.uk, and then I'm going to quickly have a glance at my phone because I actually got sent something through today, and that was a group in the local area called Missing Piece. They're running a new session which says it's for young people who may struggle with autism, ADHD or anxiety, and that's it's in Keighley on a Friday, 4 to 5:30 p.m. for 8 to 10 and 11 to 13 year olds, and there's a contact didn't hear. I can see a contact number, but I'm sure.
So yeah, it's Missing Peace and Wellbeing website. I have spoke to Emma, who is one of the founders of Missing Peace, and she said that the places are bookable. So yeah, I would maybe just get the number off the website and give them a ring if anybody was interested in doing that course, Missing Peace and Wellbeing. Thank you so much, Sasha. I know I've learned an awful lot today. It's really educated me, and I keep up the good work with the assemblies and getting your message out there, because I really just think it is a case that people don't understand. How to communicate to people with autism, or they see things, like you say, in a negative way, such as your Bon Jovi obsession. And it's just changing people's attitudes and people's understanding. I think that's what we need to do, and hopefully this podcast will help get the message out there. So.
I think maybe in the future, something that would be good is like a group or a website. Definitely have to be a very, very secure website where people could talk about these special interests and obsessions that they have, and maybe connect with other people who share them, because I know that for me, connecting with other people who love Bon Jovi has been has extremely increased my mental health and my general well-being, and it's very important to me. And obviously, I think because some of them can be quite sort of obscure in terms of the age that people are. So for example, I would say that because Bon Jovi were famous in the 1980s, were mostly famous in the 1980s, most of the Bon Jovi fans are not my age. So I would say that the people who have they are sort of not the stereotypical or general age group, then they could maybe connect with other people who feel the same way as them.
Fantastic. And it's just Bon Jovi is your comfort blanket.
Absolutely.
They are your comfort blanket.
Absolutely.
I know mine's probably getting a warm bath and a candle.
Oh, that's lovely.
So we all have our own comfort blanket, and I think you're right. It's probably the older people on some of the forums that were around before you were born. Sasha, are you in a fan club?
Well, I'm in lots of the groups on Facebook. There isn't an official fan club, I don't think, anymore. I mean, there is one, but it costs a lot of money to join. And I would definitely, if I had the money, join it.
Maybe if we win the lottery one day.
Exactly.
And be part of that. But no, thank you for joining us today, Sasha.
Thank you for having me.
It's been brilliant. And hopefully lots of people will have learned as much as we have. So I'll hand over to Sharon to say where you can hear this podcast. Obviously some of you listening will know this already, but it is available on
Wharfedale, Airedale, Craven Alliance website. It's also available to listen to on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music and YouTube.
And our social media pages. We've got a WACA social media page on Facebook, and we've got Instagram and Twitter for WACA, and we've also got our own Great Minds page on Facebook and Instagram. That's for young people's mental health and wellbeing, so there'll be different posts on there with things that hopefully can support with those things. Again, thank you for joining us, Sasha. It's been great to hear from you. You've been listening to the Great Minds Podcast. We're recording this just before Christmas, so Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to anybody.
Merry Christmas.
Exactly when this will come out, but lots to look forward to in 2024, not least hopefully getting to see Bon Jovi. Thank you, bye.